Hi, Daisy here. I am at the Tupac, the United People of Canada Embassy in downtown Ottawa at 310 St. Patrick Street in Lowertown. And I'm joined today by James Formosa, former Canadian Armed Forces Artillery Officer. He joined me once already, so happy to have him back. We met here, I guess, one night. You were,
Uh,
I think it was, pretty sure. So he's spent a little bit of time here. I just wanted to fill you guys in, fill him in a little bit on what I've witnessed here and what's been going on, and maybe get his some of his insights into what's happening here and at large. So James, if you want to say anything there, and
Thanks for having me, Chris. I
yeah,
appreciate coming on again and talking about this because there has been quite a few developments over there where you're helping out at the moment. And I think it's important for everybody watching to have a better sense of the particular types of challenges that are facing organizations or institutions with certain stated goals, like that organization with the United Peoples of Canada. It's important, of course, in this endless realm of let's say psychological operations, you need to be able to properly articulate what the challenges are. And I mean, this is coming from folks that are trying to protest against that organization in particular, the tactics they use, the types of arguments, or you might say non-arguments, that they use to form a narrative that does not track correctly with the truth of what's really happening on the ground. And that's why I think it's good for us to talk today, so I can provide a bit of insight and analysis into not only what the real implications are of the most recent developments happening there at that location, as well as some idea of how folks ought to conduct themselves going forward, even at just an individual or personal level, to try to protect yourself against the kind of challenges that you might be faced by undertaking this kind of a community organization event.
yeah, there's certainly some challenges. I was quite surprised. Surprised may be the wrong word. Nothing really surprises me anymore, but it was certainly it was different to see the amount of backlash, the people showing up, the online stuff. There's a whole lot of layers to what seems to be going on here. Maybe before we get too into it, I'll just address a couple of things. Just for one, people ask. I mean, I was on in the Ottawa Sun and on the news the other day, on the stage here with one of the board of directors, Diane Nolan. So I know Diane Nolan now. I met her only a couple of weeks ago at most. When I came down here to see what was going on, just like most people are still trying to find out what's going on. I'm not a member of Tupac. I'm Daisy Media. Now I do stuff with V4F, for instance, and I try to align myself with people with similar goals. And ultimately, I want to tell the story of what's going on here. Since I've been here, I personally think that they have some really good ideas and some things that could come good out of here. I've gotten to know Diane, and I respect her and I appreciate her. And I'm here also, as well as sharing all this. I'm in a capacity where I'm helping out where I can. Probably you are, you're a member of V4F. What you and I talk about necessarily doesn't represent V4F. So I mean, like everything in this, we're individuals.
Absolutely, and it's important. This is going to be a theme I think that will be recurring in what we're about to talk about today. Is something that I've tried to actually raise issue as well in my own personal case with my chain of command as I was going through my story, if you will. Something known as the principle of charity. And what it really just means when you boil it down, essentially, is this idea that in any given situation or instance where you're dealing with maybe a difference of values or beliefs or opinions, or there might be some sort of intellectual conflict, if you will, the principle of charity just says that you should approach your, let's say, your intellectual opponent in the best possible light. You should assume the best out of whoever it is you're dealing with, even if they might not be portraying themselves that way. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to be more compassionate and empathetic, even when it's not so fun, let's say, or comfortable for us to do, especially if you are dealing with folks that are not returning that same kind of spirit and kind towards you. Nevertheless, it's tremendously effective when you extend the principle of charity to others, because it does effectively disarm them, in the sense that a lot of these issues, and we're going to get into some real specifics here pretty soon, but a lot of these issues that we're about to see and that we're facing, not just with you there at Tupac, but in general in the current, let's say, social or political climate, stems out of an inability for people with differing points of views and opinions from being able to compassionately understand each other, or at least even take that first step at being willing to try to understand somebody that they don't agree with. And as far as what I have seen, again, and I'm, as a member of Veterans for Freedom, I'm of course affiliated with a lot of, well, all of the main goals of the institution, but as well, for my part, as an individual, as a member of V4F, as the resident Ottawa correspondent, if you will, I've taken upon myself the responsibility to get this kind of boots on the ground, direct perspective on some important issues like this, so that anybody watching, regardless of their personal position or where they happen to stand on all these issues, they can see what we have to say. They can watch the full measure of an actual in-depth, lengthy analysis, and they can make the decision for themselves whether or not they should trust something that has been, let's say, written up on just a paper or a internet news article by various sources versus live on the ground video directly from the event, or from the honest firsthand testimonials of people that have actually been there and witnessed it for themselves. And if we extend, again, the principle of charity to those folks, I have faith that there will be a growing number of people that begin to realize that a lot of the opinions that are forming around organizations such as Tupac there are happening actually as a direct result of the directed machinations of actually a very few individuals, and we might not even know exactly at the moment who those individuals are, but we do have some sense of what their goals are. And it seems to be the case from these specifics we're about to talk about, that their goal is to prevent any kind of populist, communal, volunteer style developments in the city of Ottawa, or elsewhere for that matter, that promote these kinds of ideas that destroy toxic narratives and break down barriers between people.
So I'll address a couple of the main issues, maybe just to give a little context, that were circulating in the media, and they've been on the news, they've been on TV and social media. There is a lot of this. You expect, maybe I shouldn't, but I expect a little more from legacy media than I would out of TikTok, for instance. But these same issues are, some of them were probably lies, knowing lies, like people knowingly lying. But regardless, they were happening from both. There's just a complete lack of real information and communication. So one of the major topics that people were hitting on was whether or not this building was owned or bought. So there is an owner to this building. It's not the United People of Canada. The United People of Canada leased the building, I believe, with the intention to buy it down the road. So they leased the property, which includes this entire magnificent building here, the parking lot here beside, and an attached garage to a small art rectory that's next door. Not the rectory itself, but there's a double garage. So that was their lease, and as far as I know, the intention was to buy it. So so they're not the owners; they were leaseholders. Another one that was brought up a lot was that there was no insurance. So there needs to be a $5 million liability insurance on this building. It's a heritage property, and if there's people coming out, you need insurance. So there was speculation that there was no insurance, and when the bailiff came on a document that looked like it was printed out at home to me, but on that document that was put on the doors, it said that that was one of the reasons for that they were terminating the lease and evicting. I saw the board of directors here, Will, gave me access to those documents. They're published actually now, so you can find those on my wall, or I can put them up again after all this is done. So there was insurance in place for that $5 million number prior to this, for the entire time. Prior to this, right now, and going forward, that insurance is in place. There's also a lot of claims that rent has not been paid, so that there was $10,000 owing in back rent. So I saw it was paid in college bank drafts. So I guess the second to last, so the payment that would have been due on the 15th was taken out in time, and a bank draft was taken and prepared, so that money out of the accounts of Tupac, and was attempted to be delivered to the property owner, who refused it. So that bank draft is still there. The money is still waiting. but it's an issue of the owner having refused to accept the money, as opposed to the rent not being paid or there not being money to pay the rent. So, I mean, I don't want to get too far into the weeds there. These are really issues that should not be, this is not public stuff. And never in my life have I seen where people show up on the property and demand to see their insurance and rent documents, and then the news publishes about it. Never heard of that in my life. But that's what's happened here. So I'll just put that little part aside. Maybe I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but
well, like the fact that there's no assumption, of course, of privacy anymore, and the fact that this with complete assurance and surety, of course, you're seeing in these legacy media organs, they're more than willing to already jump to whatever conclusions they may have and to tell their reading or viewing audience what they ought to believe about what's actually going on there. And frankly, if we accept the notion that this is not merely a case of incompetence, although that is also rampant at pretty much every scale of resolution that you look at, it's also excuse me, it's also a case of malevolence and deliberate attempts to diminish, demean, and discredit something, and to distract from the actual issue at hand. Because the way that I described it to yourself and other folks, I was there at the United Peoples of Canada, I believe it was the night that a lot of these problems began there with the bailiff, and I spoke more directly to you about this, but as well to a few others, about this notion of lawfare, which is a pesky, if in this instance you might call it like an offshoot of this fourth generational warfare piece, where essentially the tactic being used, instead of something very overt, very bombastic, like literally bombs and bullets, in terms of a psychological operation, what agitators will do is they will use an overextended and bureaucratic legalistic system against itself. And it's, of course, systems like ours in Canada are ripe for this sort of abuse, precisely because, like many of our other institutions, they have been effectively overrun and or demoralized for decades before you or I or many of the people watching ever became truly aware of what was happening.
Yeah.
And so as a result of this, it leaves a lot of room for no clear answers. We are now in a universe of ambiguity, which does not work in the favor of those who care about things like objectivity and truth with a capital T. And so as a result of this, you being us trying to nobly strive upward toward the truth, if I could be so bold, we are mired instead with having to account for almost being like our own version of Snopes or our own fact checkers, to say, well, we're not even talking about this because the issue you have raised is not what we're really dealing with here. It's not an issue, for instance, of a check bouncing or the folks at the United Peoples of Canada refusing to pay their rent. They made every effort, as far as we can tell. And if we're to take, again, in the principle of charity, I'm taking to heart this notion that they made every attempt on their end to pay their dues in the appropriate time frame, but there was pressure put on, most likely the owners from, again, these various agitators and actors in the community, in an effort to prevent the easy operation of this really community center, is probably one of the better ways to describe it. Because, again, contrary to what people may think or believe about the place, to anybody watching, especially all the haters, as they may in fact be around or may watch at some later time, if they are even willing to watch this long into the show.
They're on my case hard.
They should know that the invitation is always open and welcome for them to come see for themselves what's going on at the location, to hear directly from the mouths of the volunteers and the people involved, to say, why are you here? What are you doing? What is the capacity with which you volunteer? What help do you actually provide? Like I said, I'm not affiliated with the United Peoples of Canada, but if people would try to lump me in or say that I did something in affiliation with them, well, yes, I will admit that on a certain day, I'm actually the date escapes me right now, but I was involved in a small measure of volunteering because I helped set up a barbecue that was open to any and all members of the public. So if you want to nail me for that, I'm more than willing to allow you.
Yeah. I've been to a couple of those barbecues, and actually the barbecues were quite lovely. I was here at one just the other day, and I mean, like this is an area. Lower Town in Ottawa is an area that's it's kind of overlooked and neglected. It's down away from the hill a little bit, kind of out toward east of the hill. It's down tucked away outside of the Byward Market, and there's a homeless shelter, I guess, in each direction. There's two of them at least within a couple of blocks of here. I counted one night in the street like 35 people in the streets, like just right in the area here. And I don't mean like just standing around in the street. I mean like they were in the streets. So this is a suffering community. And already in the short time that this group has been here, I've seen homeless people at barbecues. There's a couple of tents set up out front with bananas, some granola bars, hand sanitizer as well for people that are worried about such, prepackaged and some water or whatever. And if people need it, they can have it. Same with the protesters who were here in the rain the other day. As long as they were not, there's one person that's been trespassed. But other than that person, everyone's allowed to come under the tent to protest, just anyone alike. So there's signs on the front of them that say "Adopt a Neighbor," which is kind of an offshoot type thing of "Adopt a Trucker." Originally, that's where that's how it was thought out. But yeah, it's for everyone, like you say. There was a large group of protesters. Maybe not. We covered got the gist from before. I'll just throw on the first video of a few of the protesters that were here. There's quite a lot of video on my wall for anyone that wants to see more of this. But here's just a short exchange with some protesters here. It's just a couple of minutes, but it'll give you an idea of this is small compared to what I've seen. So just have a look.
You film people? Do you have a voice?
I didn't post that eviction notice.
You're not allowed to speak because you're a woman?
Stop discrimination.
Is that what this group is about? If you're a woman, you
no
can speak?
income.
Good to know. And here's another tool. Here, look at this picture. This is what stupid looks like.
It's in the Bill of Rights.
When you don't go to school, kids, this is what happens to you. Look, 2 + 2 = 5.
Transphobia and homophobia that your people have brought here. The transphobia and homophobia
your freedom
your people have brought here
is false.
That is against the charter. All this is stupid conspiracy bullshit. Get help.
Jesus is the way.
Fuck the Bible. Fuck the Bible.
Not you guys.
No,
Want to take me
Crazy people. Who do you listen to, buddy? Billy Bob on YouTube? Billy Bob on YouTube. He knows better. Oh, Billy Bob.
I just like Ram Ranch supporting everyone. You know what Ram Ranch is?
You know what? Maybe I'll stop it there. So she's preparing to play this thing. That's Purse Nuggets, a local left-leaning agitator on TikTok. Let's say.
What
it's
lovely
too vulgar.
people. I'm sure they're great at parties and they have a vibrant social life.
Man.
But in all seriousness, though, I look forward to future opportunities. I can foresee it already now that I will likely find myself out there, probably amongst folks like that, and I look forward to having a conversation with them. I have a certain standard, of course, just like in keeping with what I mentioned before about the principle of charity, with which I intend to interact and to try to actually find some common ground. Yes, even with people like that, which may seem like I'm biting off more than I can chew, perhaps, but nevertheless, there's a certain inherent nobility in making the effort, regardless of the spirit with which it is received and how they try to come back at you, because even just in that short clip, you heard a lot of objectively false things. And furthermore, I might add as well, again, it's easier, of course, for us to talk about this because to speak to some of those individuals directly, it might put their guard up more, if you will. But like the one woman who was filming her own video probably for TikTok. I wonder who this Billy Bob guy is on YouTube. He sounds like a great fellow, but besides him and the rest of us contributing to independent media, I would be curious to have a conversation with her about what her sources are, where she gathers her information, how she makes value judgments. And just like Jeff Evely, the Ops Sergeant Major at Veterans for Freedom, loves to champion this, I definitely agree with it too. The Socratic method, I mean, it's been around since ancient times, since Socrates, thousands of years. And we would all be amazed at the amount of progress you can make with people by listening more than you speak, even if you feel like you've got a better handle on the truth, let's say. And by forcing folks, well, not deliberately forcing, but by framing the conversation as such that you are attempting to actually understand them and where they're coming from and why it is they believe what they believe, and make them answer questions about themselves. First of all, people love to talk about themselves. I'm guilty of that too. Yeah, but when you say with all sincerity, like, for instance, I mean, I profess my belief in the Bible and Christianity, and the other woman in particular had a big problem with it and liked to associate both Tupac and the church building with homophobia and transphobia. But I would be interested to see how somebody like that, for instance, would respond to somebody like myself saying that I am a Christian and I do believe in the Bible, but I would welcome anybody from, if you claim membership to that community, or if you want to come as a trans person, if you will, if like that's something that you're trying to bring representation in some sense, or you want to come talk about that as something you perceive to be an issue. Yeah. There's no barrier, at least from our end, to any people of any backgrounds, whoever they are, from coming and having a conversation. So their implication that we're somehow discriminating carries no water. And furthermore, even if you don't reach, like, okay, let's be perfectly candid here. The woman that was raising her voice and saying rather offensive things about the Bible, to my senses, nevertheless, you might never reach somebody like her, but there was a large group of people around her, not just folks that will automatically assume that she's in the right, but people that are just curious and want to know what all the fuss is about because of the volume that they tend to raise. And they will for themselves be able to see, on the one hand, somebody behaving in a rather unprofessional or immature manner, and they'll get to see the juxtaposition with folks like yourself, and hopefully, and as time goes on, the volunteers there will become better versed in this, just by the simple fact that they're going to have so much experience dealing with people like this, where the time will come that people can just see this perfect dichotomy between angry, uninformed myopia, the demoralized masses, or the useful idiots to the Soviet Revolution, if you will, from calling back once again to Yuri Bezmenov. But the comparison between those folks and people who have a much more rigidly articulated system of values and beliefs. Our beliefs, I might add, are our own, rather than things that we tend to parrot from other locations or without any personal reflection or introspection. And that huge gulf of a difference between how we're approaching whatever the issue is will become readily apparent to those folks on the street that are watching. So you might never reach the loudest and most irate person, but you will, without even knowing it, like firsthand. But
not to mention the sorry, not to mention the 75 now, but I mean this will be seen by quite a few people, and perhaps you're right. It really is like, so that small interaction that I showed, that same woman came at me with a group of about 10 people, all screaming at me the other day. And, in that instance, there's no way that I'm going to get through to those people. It's hard to just stay calm enough to even be there, honestly. And I mean, I've been through some stuff there with all kinds of people in my face and cameras and stuff, but it still gets you going when there's that much intensity and emotion. Like these people have fully triggered themselves and they're coming at you. And I don't think they're going to hurt me, like hit me or hurt. But I mean, just that energy alone, for a guy like I get spun up kind of easily, it takes a lot just to get through that. But even interactions with those angry type people, there's a couple of people that were here and on those protests, and another gentleman in cases where it started out with that yelling and screaming and whatnot. But through the course of a couple of hours of yelling, then some talking, those people eventually were talking. In fact, one of the girls that was just in the video here, personally, I wanted to turn it off because I didn't want the obscene stuff to play. She's been on a lot of videos, but she just actually walked through with the director. She's taking a tour right now, respectfully taking a tour. She's not yelling. She's filming. And so, I mean, it almost blew my mind. I mentioned to you off camera another similar story where there was a local homeless man that was coming through, and he'd seen a lot of stuff on TikTok and heard all these things about here. And he was fired up. He's obviously hurt and suffering, and he'd heard a lot of stuff and seen a lot of stuff that people were saying on TikTok. He came down here pretty upset and was trying to talk to Will, but I was around a couple other people. But with the loud commotion, I came out and I started filming. And that went on for a while. Him and I got into it. There's a video on my Facebook about it, and he was live on U Ottawa Scotty's tour that came through here the other night. So you can check that out if you'd like. But that gentleman, after a couple of hours out front, another guy I know, Stretch, ended up talking to him kind of away from here across the street for about an hour, and came back with him, introduced him to all of us that were still here, and took him on a tour. And that gentleman is back today, and he met the girl downstairs, and they're taking a tour together. So he's with that. It's already, we're making a little headway there. That's something I don't know if it could have been. I wouldn't have thought that possible a few weeks ago or a week ago here.
And I think it's important to focus on this point here as well, too, is this idea that, again, when we're met with some aggression or, being mischaracterized, or, people are just saying stuff about you that's not true or besmirches your character, it gets your defenses up. It makes you want to, almost as like a visceral gut reaction, you want to be defensive.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, what really appeals to people and breaks down some of these barriers where you're not able to communicate is to, and again, with this principle of charity and a truly open-hearted effort, when those folks begin to, and it might take a lot of time and going from the yelling to slowly lowering the volume, when they see in your eyes, you or whoever else may be there, that you're taking the time with them, you're showing that you're giving them like the inherent worth and value that every individual person has. Like, your opinion matters, your status in the world, what's going on with you, everybody's got problems. But when you meet somebody at their level of need and say, I want to know you better, I want to understand you better as much as I want you to know me and understand me better, it's incredibly difficult for people to maintain that level of vitriol unless that was the only reason whatsoever that they ever came. Like, unless it's something that is, and I might even argue from a bit of my theological perspective that it's even a spiritual level of attack, or something where there is the only intent and purpose that they came was for deception and destruction, or to twist a narrative, then yes, you might not even be able to reach those people. But for every one of those people, there's 10 times or more people that have just been spun up by those underhanded and deceptive behaviors of others. And again, you can appeal to what we have in common with those folks, like the gentleman you mentioned who was upset with you until he got a tour or he got to speak with somebody for an hour. He was told a bunch of things that were untrue about the place. But if we're assuming the principle of charity, I would say, okay, I'm going to put myself in his position. Well, if I thought that all of those things were true, I would be upset as well. And I would want us to not be around. But the thing that binds us together, the common ground that you were able to reach there, was this idea that even though he may be misinformed or mistaken about some of the facts, the thing that you both share is you both want that community to be safer and better for everyone. And his level of being upset was because he thought falsely that there were things going on that were going to be a detriment to both himself and other members in his community. And when you come to them again with all open-heartedness and sincerity and say, I understand, I see the same problems that you see, I recognize that they are problems and that they ought to be actually properly addressed and ministered to, and that's part of what our mission or their mission and goals are. and then they get to again with their own eyes and their own ears come in, see the people, see what they're physically, the actual work or volunteering, the renovation work, as well as the like you say, the material benefits that they're bringing in terms of like free food and sometimes even shelter for folks.
Yeah, resources for sure.
The resources is, again, it obliterates the sandcastle that's been constructed by those other folks making their contrary. Now, I would be very hesitant to call it media, because it's more like some form of psychological warfare. In a lot of cases, if they're fully demoralized people, they don't even realize the forces at work that they're or who's bidding that they're actually doing.
The whole, actually, that specific experience with the gentleman, the homeless gentleman, it was quite enlightening to me on a few levels. For one, I think, the guy had some stuff that he needed to get out, and he was upset. He was worried. There's a lot of stuff going on, but I think a lot of that was him. I mean, it came out in yelling, but that was probably only the case because it was boiled up inside him for so long with not able to talk about it. And once that was out, even today, he's kind of riled. He's here, right? So we talk, but he was kind of a riled up guy just in general. So when you add that, and once he got that all out, then it was a whole different ball game too. Which made me think, often when people are yelling and engaging like that, and we think that we can maybe make contact and get in there and convince them then. Well, they might not be trying to do that yet. Maybe that person is much earlier along in the process of where we need to try to talk. They need to be listened to, ideally not yelling. But it seems that there's a lot of people that need to get some stuff out, perhaps, and then we can maybe have the conversation.
Because frankly, I mean, not even to speak to whatever personal challenges or issues might be faced in his position, regardless of the way the rest of our world or society has been for the last couple of years. That being said, all of us have suffered consequences as a result of the way that our world has drastically changed, and the way that our lives have changed as a consequence of it. So we all have things we're going through, if you will. And as a result of that again, it's the suffering is a problem unto itself, but it's also a wonderful opportunity because it's something that we can all share in identifying with. And for instance, that gentleman needs to know that his life matters, his suffering matters, what's happened to him is important, should be important, and should be cared about, not just by himself, but by others around him. Because by the looks of it, again, and the reason why it got him more on the defensive, if you will, is because he was given false information about how whatever's going on there might be a further challenge or detriment, not only to him, but to other people I'm sure he has in his life that he cares about. And again, like, think about this level of, again, this charity and empathy. If I could be so bold and say, like, I hope it's emanating from the subject matter with which I'm speaking, but like this man has people he cares about. He has not only problems in his personal life that he would like to address, but he would like to raise the standard of living for the folks that matter to him the most as well, his most close friends or family, whoever is dear to his heart. And when, again, it's like we're taking ourselves out of this headspace of the petty tribalism and, again, the psychological operations that we've all been subjected to for so very long, and say, let's bring back our common humanity, the spirit of what it means to actually have this attitude towards loving your neighbor at the simplest form, and saying that in order for me to even do that at the outset, I have to recognize that you're a person, you're an individual person with a life and a soul who matters, and the things that concern you, regardless of where they may stem from or what might be informing them, it matters that we get to the bottom of it and that we find a common level of understanding, because those things that unite us across, like in this case, it would be our deep-seated cares for one another, that transcends all of the deceptive tools that are being used against us in an effort to prevent us from talking to one another. Because those ones, like I said, the ones who are only and for the pure, simple purpose of sowing dissension and deception and raising anger, they're doing this because they are, in fact, absolutely abjectly terrified of the consequences of open open-hearted, charitable discussions amongst people who disagree, because the more they do that, the less and less they tend to disagree on the most important things.
Well, and that's interesting too. So not only, I mean, through listening and figuring out what the person, you know, when the person's talking to you, they either need something or they're there for something, right? So if you're trying to talk and give them something and that's not working, then that means that they need something. Maybe it's an ear. But not only that, when you have these interactions with some of the most upset people that we hear, and you're able to get through, and then now we're able to talk about it, people are going to know that we're not here attacking people. That, or at least no one here is. I know I'm sure as heck not, and I know you would never do that. It exposes the people whose motives are here purely to cause problems and to do, as you say, like, you know, to undermine what's going on here, to attack. Those people become exposed for what they are, and that actually often clears them away. Like, there's very few here today for whatever reason. But I mean, we made one of the person nuggets that just came through here. Often, I mean, if she was online and angry and there's a crowd out front, there may be a lot more people down here agitated on either side of this dilemma, and probably a bunch of gawkers as well.
Or if I would even hazard to suggest, if I was around and she started filming for her, let's say her TikTok fan base, if there is one, I don't think she'd be super keen on filming our interaction for any deliberate length of time, for the simple fact that I contend this now, and I still fully intend, if I am to interact with these folks, I'm going to try to maintain the exact same air of professionalism and respect with which you and I discuss things. And regardless of what they happen to say to me, or if they levy accusations, you name it, I'm not going to return that level of vitriol with venom of my own. Doesn't matter that I might say that I have the intellectual tools in my toolbox, if you will, to argue circles around a lot of the misinformation, if I can use the term, that they're levying. Nevertheless, even without going into the specifics of, like, I have better arguments than these people, I have a better countenance. You have a better countenance. The way that you just treat human beings is a testimony unto itself. And if they're yelling, being nasty in a way that, like, it doesn't matter who you are, even if you're one of their fans, you can tell what type of tone a person is taking. And if their tone is only being met with something that's returning in a overwhelming sense of kindness and compassion, it's, like I said at the very beginning of this talk, it's utterly disarming. And they won't want it to be on record, because it just, again, by that juxtaposition, it makes them look that much more spiteful in comparison.
Yeah, and exactly. And it's not necessarily the interaction. You may not win the interact. Like, it's not about winning, first of all, but it may not break through with the person that you're right there with. But with the amount of cameras, the amount of stuff that's being filmed, all the different channels that's going out on either side, you know, lots of people are seeing this, and it's those other people that see it. And when they see such, like you say, a juxtaposition of something so extreme, I mean, often that'll click something. You know, if you hear somebody talking politely and trying to have a conversation, and another person screaming obscenities aggressively in their face, I mean, it's hard to not see that when you're watching it, no matter what the people side either person is on.
In a certain sense, right? The content almost doesn't matter. And the thing is, yes, we've seen anyway from what we've been witnessing that for a lot of those folks, the content really doesn't matter, because it seems more about an ongoing psychological process of dealing with a lot of emotional trauma in these people. Because effectively, I use the term, piggybacking off Yuri Bezmenov, of demoralization, but it's also like a lot of these people, they are traumatized. There's no, again, and I'm not speaking as a psychologist, like, again, my background is in history and philosophy. Nevertheless, from all of the behavioral modifications we've seen in people, the increase in neuroticism and fearfulness, of course, towards others, it's very reminiscent of various forms of things like, you name it, Stockholm syndrome, or the idea that it's again, neuroticism is probably the best umbrella term for this, because otherwise I have a hard time explaining, even to my own mind, how people might be going along with, let's say, certain enforced social behaviors and practices, even though there is no longer any rules for them. especially when it's clearly at a great personal detriment to their health. Something like this comes to mind when it's like 30+ degree heat and you're alone outside on a sidewalk. That I'm concerned about the oxygen levels in these people's brains, not for the quality of their arguments, but for their own well-being and their health. And if you have oxygen starvation, it's a really big problem for reasoning capacity, but also for maintaining your consciousness. And we don't want anybody thundering in on the pavements, God forbid.
Yeah. And it gets warm here. And like, I mean, yeah, that's a complicated issue. But even with like people are free to do what they like here. No one will ever be attacked at this place for having a mask. There's masks too for people if they need them, or want them, as well as hand sanitizer. Like, we're not looking to fight and impose anything. We use we, the royal we. Nobody here is trying to exclude anyone for any reason, unless they force the hand. If you're aggressive or violent, or bring drugs or alcohol onto the premises, that's the only real issues that you'll have. But it's just interesting here in the comments. It's a little microcosm of some of the stuff going on, like a little war. There's someone on here. So I'm not sure if you remember the symbol for this place. So it's the red banner with the white tree of life on it. Right. So there's a whole fight in here with people screaming that that's a Nazi symbol. So I've been explained a little bit of the story of why this tree of life, and I can't tell it exactly, but that the tree of life, it has 13 leaves, this tree of life. And that represents the provinces and territories, all the nations of Canada, and further reach. And they want to encompass all nations, Indigenous nations. We have representation probably in Canada of if not every country, pretty much every country in the world would have some representation here in Canada. So that's kind of the idea, to represent everybody. And there are also, I mean, for people who have religious beliefs, there is also a deeper kind of religious story that might be Psalm 22. I can't quote it all exactly, but so there's a history there, but it's certainly not a Nazi symbol as far as I know.
In fact, the thing I thought it was that, and some people said this to kind of lighten the mood, but it's like, are they just really big fans of Lord of the Rings? Because it looks a lot like the White Tree of Gondor.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
And but yeah, this is the problem with this kind of well poisoning that happens and that drags these arguments through the mud instead of actually talking about what's really at stake here. Because anybody can make a claim like that, but frankly, and again, this is a common tactic for those watching in the audience to know, this is why it can be almost endlessly frustrating to deal with certain lines of argumentation, because something like that is a perfect example of a non sequitur. They just sort of throw out something that is an absurd claim, an extraordinary claim that would require extraordinary evidence to actually corroborate and back it up. But because it's so it's something that inspires feelings in people because of the implications behind it, rather than any facts or evidence or proof to back it up. That's supposed to stand on its own 2 feet, if you will. That's the argument. Just, I'm going to throw this thing out here because it'll be really upsetting to people if it were true. Yeah, sure, but there's no basis in reality. So why are we even talking about it? But nevertheless, again, with something like a Socratic method, you can tear apart a lot of these non sequiturs by just saying, okay, you're making this claim. Why do you believe that? What about this makes you think that there's this necessary connection? Can you show me how you demonstrate it, and how anything whatsoever of what's happening here is in any way remotely possible to be connected in that fashion? And of course, they will have nothing. They'll probably, in the case, I can't see the comments right now, but it's likely that if you do direct and in a more professional manner like that, try to confront the factual issues that they're presenting, they'll usually respond just with another non sequitur. So instead of answering your, kind of just like watching any video from our House of Commons or Parliament these days, they won't answer the question. They'll just say some other rehearsed talking points and lead you down another yellow brick road.
Yeah. And that's clearly when that's being done, that's clearly by design. Okay. So I guess I mentioned to you too about it's interesting. So the incident that happened, there was a tragic incident here, just off to my left here, just outside the building. Might have been about a week ago now, but a local woman passed away during the night. I guess one of the one of the people that was doing a check around the building may have saw it. But anyway, so it was right here in the alcove of the building. And from what I understand, it was an overdose. Police attended and then an ambulance and a coroner. I mean, it took a number of hours, and eventually the body was taken away and left behind, actually. Just there was a biohazard, yellow biohazard bag, with the thing around it and the label. I got some pictures of it, but that was left behind after at the scene for a week. Before the city, I don't know if the city came back, but the city hadn't come back to get it after a week. It's gone today. And that just struck me as something, there's people are tearing this place down that know nothing about it at all. People are standing out front screaming, with signs that say, "Go home, terrorist." And as far as I can understand, and from everything I've seen, this building and the idea and the mission of the people ultimately here is to help the community. I mean, like, from the community out, right? Like, so, and even in the short time I've spent around here, they are doing that. It's happening right now. Like that homeless man was just here. He had a banana. He's giving a tour to Purse Nuggets. Like, that stuff is already happening, even with the turmoil here. So I can't help but think, that person in the street there was suffering terribly, and she didn't have to die out there alone in the street. That could have been prevented. And I imagine had this building been operating, it would have been prevented. I can't, no one knows the future, but it's just, right. It's a striking example.
And it would be interesting to know from a lot of those the people that in a more directed fashion want to meet out front there of the building with their vitriol and their hate-filled screeds, let's say. I'd be interested to know how much of a direct personal effort they've made towards, let's say, helping issues with the local homeless community, or dealing with the rampant problems with drug abuse and the real cost of human suffering, because they pay a lot of lip service to this. Of course, they will shriek to the high heavens about supposed bad behaviors or the evils, their perceived evils of the volunteers at that institution, which are utterly baseless. But nevertheless, if you try to hold them to account and say, well, what have you done lately? They will almost assuredly, they will come up short. And so it's a tremendous disappointment. It should be on their part to see that at the end of the day, they are really wasting their time, because to try, even to some of the worst of the culprits, let's say, to try to extend the principle of charity, even if they've been utterly psyoped or demoralized to oblivion, to get to the worked up, frenzied state that they're now at. The reason why that was able to happen in the first place, and the most nefarious aspect of this subversion piece that I always rail against, is how it uses the best parts of people against them. So one of the best things about being a human being is our capacity for compassion and empathy. But there's also the analogy that I heard back in the Army is there's nothing more compassionate than a mother bear to her cubs, but you better not be in between the two of them, because then that compassion is not going to look very nice to you in your position. And the problem is, for these demoralized people, they're acting like mama bear, and they think they're protecting their cubs. And these more nefarious workers and sowers of dissension have tried to throw Tupac and folks like that in the middle, saying, look, that's the enemy. That's the danger. They're a threat to the things you love and care the most about. But if they were to actually look at the real problems around them, I can't help it to quote the scripture, if they took the plank out of their own eye before judging the speck of dust in yours, they would see that there is a tremendous, tremendous amount of human misery in this area, because we are not doing what we ought to be doing with respect to helping our community, to helping others, to helping the downtrodden, to raising them up, to encouraging their own inborn and latent desires that they have. These people are not there by their own choosing, of course. If they're in a place, let's say, that's like of extreme financial hardship, they certainly, if you, again, coming to them with all sincerity, they would love to raise themselves up and for their lives to be better, and for things to, to have a win for once, if you will. And if we can finally truly impart that notion upon people, that's the true spirit and underlying desire it is the true desire of the hearts of the wonderful people that I have had the pleasure of meeting with there. I know it's hard. None of us are perfect. We all have our issues, but nevertheless, there's still this case to be made that everybody can be a part of this project.
Oh, sorry about that. I phone overheated there. My phone's overheating.
That's okay. I think
this building.
you did just put up a comment. If you wanted to run that back up on the screen,
I didn't do it on purpose. I can put it back up though.
I saw Ralph from The Simpsons.
Yeah. And
okay, so no conservatives. Now, when he says capital, like, so for instance, let's just analyze this comment here.
Yeah.
So no conservatives. Now, when he says capital C, does this mean, I don't know if Frederick is referring to like members of the Conservative Party or just people with a more conservative political bent, because I think it would be fair enough to say that, you know, as far as my own, and this is only speaking as a man, as a person, as an individual, my political ideology, if you will, certainly would probably lean towards conservatism. And I support the again, in the principle of charity, the underlying ethical and moral principles that guide the volunteers at that place. There's no way I could not support it, because it's arguably something that should be universalizable, which is again kind of what this whole place is professing to be about. So again, it's like, sorry, Frederick, whoever you are and wherever you are.
There you go. Conservative Bud. So this is also one of the people that, so in response to what you said, he in the same comment, so it was a Nazi. Why are you using a Nazi symbol? So again, I addressed that issue earlier. It's not a Nazi symbol. And I mean, that's still the argument that he's saying, and conservative Bud. So, I mean, he's calling you Bud in a derogatory way, obviously.
Oh, well, I'm not your buddy, guy.
Yeah, guy. Yeah, I'm not your friend, pal.
I mean, it would be nice if we were able to have a open conversation and you could understand where I'm coming from, and I could address whatever concerns you may have and see why it is that you think that there's these various issues that you perceive to be the case. Because I in full disclosure, I must admit, sir, I do believe you are mistaken. Nevertheless, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be able to talk about it and actually come to some kind of common ground and understanding. But if you have no desire to actually reach a common ground or understanding, then there's nothing I can really do in that regard.
Yeah. See, you're, I could learn a thing or two from you, I'm sure. Quite a few.
Like, I mean, you know, it's what purpose does it serve for me to be upset or frustrated with an individual like this? Because I don't bear any ill will towards him. We clearly seem to have what may be a vast gulf in disagreement, but I would hope, again, I'm extending to Frederick now that the principle of charity, where I say, if you take me at face value, like literally just look at my face, look at the words that I'm saying, do you sense any inherent attempt to deceive you here, or to be like, I'm not coming from a place of disrespect or wanting to even disrespect him or where he's coming from. I truly, from the bottom of my heart, want us to be able to be conversant, even in places where it seems challenging, or that it's kind of like a fight. Because again, even if folks like him are from an older generation, there's a lot of fist fights on the playground or like growing up and things like that. And I would argue for like some of the older generations, it's to our benefit that we were able to have that sort of a growing up experience, because then you learned appropriate boundaries, you learned the real cost of violence and why it's actually better not to engage in those things, or the way that my elders used to say, that nobody truly wins a fight, because once you've gotten to the point where you actually have to resort to violence, you've essentially already lost.
Yeah.
You've lost the wonderful banner of peaceful understanding that you could have had otherwise. And that's not a road that I want to go down. And it's not one that we should be so quick and easily moved to travel upon, both from our side or from somebody that might say that they're directly in opposition to us. It's not something that we should be engaging in.
Yeah. Well, very well said. And like you say, even in a calm down example, like this is just another example of what you were saying about outside, when the people are, if someone's screaming and yelling at you, the way you respond is even far more important than in getting through, or seems to be far more important than, I don't know where I was going with that. Sorry, I'm overheating. So not only is my phone overheating, I'm overheating. And and it's about to die. But I think maybe on that nice, wonderful words there, that positive note, maybe we can call it there. I got a few things I got to do here too today. There's just a few things I wanted to touch on. There's going to be a rally in the Valley on Saturday in Pembroke. I've posted about that. I will be attending that. I don't know if I don't want to speak for you.
Thank you for letting me know. It was somewhat on my radar before this, but the nature of this new profession, if you will, that I found myself in, there's a lot of moving parts, but I think it's important in my capacity, like not just as like a local Ottawa correspondent, if you will, but just being in generally this, like the capital area, it behooves me, as they used to like to say all the time in the officer ranks, they love that word, it behooves me to throw my name in the hat, so to speak. And if they'll have me as a speaker at that event, I would love to join. I'd be happy to be down there and to speak to whoever would like to approach me or would have questions or concerns they'd like to raise, or if people end up showing up to that event who aren't even necessarily in agreement with the purpose or the intent behind it. If you have disagreements, I'm happy to discuss your concerns and meet anybody at whatever way they'd like to talk about it.
That's awesome. So I spoke to Josh. I'm wearing the Save Canada hat. So Josh is a young 17-year-old young man there that was instrumental in this initiative here. And I met him back at the KOA in Renfrew at that event a while back. So I said I'd ask you. So there you go, Josh. We got James. We'll add James Formosa to the speaking lineup there. That's Pembroke. I posted all about it. Saturday in Pembroke, and there'll be different groups meeting up at different points in the Valley and heading in there kind of together. So check that out on my page. And James, thanks so much again for joining me. I'll relay that message on to Josh.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks. We'll talk again soon.